Hey, welcome into the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl post-game podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer. No, Brian Christopherson, Michael Bruns. They're busy working at Yankee Stadium trying to bring you all of the coverage at Husker247 of Nebraska's 20-15 win over Boston College. I'm hanging out here for a few minutes, just kind of going through some spare thoughts that I have on the game. Of course, we have the game balls, the report card, the at the gun thoughts, the conversation starters, coverage starting to trickle in. All of that can be found at Husker247.com. If you're looking for something right away or something to read and don't want to just hear me bloviate on Nebraska's win. But I do have a few thoughts here for a handful of minutes that kind of dive into a few of these things. We'll start with this. Felt really important for Nebraska to get that win. They finished with a winning season for the first time since 2016. They won a bowl game for the first time since 2015. They went into a East Coast environment with a little bit of tricky field conditions. And honestly, I thought they played pretty well throughout. I mean, there's a lot of issues, some of which I anticipate will be corrected sooner than later. And then, of course, there's also special teams, which we can spend a few minutes on as well. But I wanted to talk through some individual performances to start with. Obviously, we do our game balls. I thought all three of the players that we chose this week were really representative of kind of a lot of different things in this game. To start with, you have Rahmir Johnson and Ty Robinson among several seniors that went out in their final game here on Saturday and put together a strong performance and did it in a way that I think was meaningful to them, did it in a way that is going to be memorable for their Nebraska careers, and got to put a bow on what has been a rough, time period for these guys. Rahmir Johnson and Ty Robinson have been part of Nebraska's program since they were part of, I believe, the 2019 class. And these are guys that have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this Husker program. They embody what it means to be a Nebraska Cornhusker. And it's not always national championships or conference championships or even bowl seasons. But they put a lot of work in. And for those guys to be able to go out how they did in Yankee Stadium as winners, I think is valuable. For them, it's valuable for the program. And so to just kind of highlight, I mean, Rahmir Johnson finished the game off with the final first down. He scored the first touchdown. He had 60 yards on, I believe, 10 carries. He had a catch in there as well. He just played really well. And he was someone that, I think Matt Rule really wanted to give this opportunity to here in the Northeast. He's a guy that grew up 10 minutes away from Yankee Stadium, someone that had a lot of friends and family that was there, someone who went through a lot of, life in 2024. So it was cool to see Rahmir Johnson get to have that moment with this team. And this is a guy that, 2021 feels like it's an eternity ago, but we saw, some of the best of Rahmir Johnson in that season and have been kind of waiting for it to emerge ever since. And he had, an impact on the 2024 season well before this bowl game. But I was very happy for Rahmir Johnson. And then Ty Robinson was able to get a sack. He was involved a lot. He and Nash Hutmaker played well up front. There's a guy that I think it meant a lot to him to be able to get to a bowl game, to showcase Nebraska here in bowl season, something that he hasn't been a part of, to get that winning season, to go out with a win. He has, I think, an opportunity in front of him to go play in the NFL and at the very least will be a practice squad guy, but could very well be on active rosters at this time next year. And so, for Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker and MJ Sherman and some of those guys defensively, it was a really strong performance and an important one for them, I think, personally. And so just wanted to highlight those two. And then Vincent Shavers, the other guy to get a game ball, he's on the other end of the spectrum. This was someone who was able to step in and play because Mekhi Bayer wasn't there. He played really well. He kind of, insinuated that there was no transfer portal for him, that he was Nebraska. And then he came out in the very first defensive play, stuck the Boston College running back for a tackle for a loss. He ends up getting a sack and forces a fumble later. finished with 5 total tackles, 2 TFLs, is a guy that I think a lot of people are going to be excited about what he could be in 2025. And so this bowl game operated as a springboard, and you have more guys like that. Donovan Jones played a lot in the secondary. We'll see what his role is in the spring and then again in the fall. But that was a freshman in the 2024 class with a ton of athleticism that, we weren't sure where he was going to fall for this staff, but it was somebody that we knew that they liked a lot. And they had an opportunity with Tommy Hill out with some injuries or other things going on where they just thought, you know what, he's had good practices. Let's get him in. Let's see what he can do. And I thought he performed pretty admirably in his first real run of play in field conditions that, that's difficult out there to keep your footing, to kind of play through that. So Donovan Jones kind of stood out in that regard. We saw Riley Van Poppel come up with a big helpful, play. I don't know that he got the actual stop on the 4th down, but once again, Riley Van Poppel was involved there. He was involved throughout the game. He's someone that I think Nebraska would have benefited from not redshirting. It'll be curious if they kind of move forward with a different strategy as far as redshirting goes. But you have those sort of players throughout on the defensive side. And then, of course, on offense, you have a lot of guys like Dylan Raiola and Emmett Johnson. You have Ja'Cory Barney. You have Luke Lindenmeyer, who could be involved as a tight end. We saw him used on Saturday in a way that was creative. So there's players that were able to cap their career on Saturday with this Pinstripe Bowl win, and there's guys who are able to maybe jumpstart what the future of Nebraska could be for 2025. And so overall, good to see some strong performances in there. Good to see Nebraska leave with a win. Individually on the offensive side, we talked a little about Rahmir, but Dylan Raiola started that game. You could tell they wanted to get the ball downfield. He just could not hit on some of those deep throws. He had the early interception, but he really sort of settled in throughout the game. I think he finished 12 of 15 in the second half. He was hitting his receivers and giving them opportunities. 2 of those incompletions were really could have been touchdowns down there in the red zone. And so Nebraska, I thought, looked better offensively coming off of that layoff with those bowl practices and an opportunity for Dylan Raiola to get healthy, to be able to be closer to 100%. We saw him scramble a little bit. We saw him get up in the face of a defender who hit him. And Nebraska picked up a critical 15-yard penalty that helped close out the game. And we're going to have all offseason to talk about Dylan Raiola and where the maturation and the growth is going to come from and the development and what this could look like in Dana Holgerson's offense and everything else. But I think we saw on Saturday that he has all the tools to be a special player. Nebraska is going to continue to try to put together wide receiver cores around him and build game plans with him that could be really helpful. And one guy that I think is going to be helpful for Dylan Raiola next year is Emmett Johnson. He's set to come back, never officially entered the transfer portal. Nebraska was able to prevent that from happening. He had 66 yards on the ground today, had a few catches as well, caught a touchdown pass on a critical 4th down, a nice play design, nice play call, and a nice throw from Dylan to Emmett Johnson. And so, the play that stood out for me, he had the 34-yard run where he just had a great cut in the backfield. Again, rough conditions to have to plant and try to juke there, but he was able to pull it off. Races through the middle of the defense, not quite able to hit the home run on the touchdown. Nebraska ultimately doesn't end up scoring there, but you want to see those explosive running plays. And Emmett, throughout his kind of short time with Nebraska, has popped up, every now and then with some 20 and 30-yard runs. We'll see what a full offseason and potentially just having the job, what that does for his confidence and where he's able to come in at the wide receiver spot and just sort of in the passing game in general. Just a few, kind of rapid fire thoughts. Jamal Banks finishes out with 4 catches, 79 yards, somewhere in that neighborhood. And a strong kind of game for him to finish out as well. I think he would have liked to have caught that touchdown pass, certainly in the red zone. But Jamal Banks put on a nice performance there. Ja'Cory Barney was targeted 7 times. It just wasn't able to come together on Saturday. He had a couple catches. They were able to get him the ball, relatively short near the line of scrimmage, but it just felt like they could not get him the ball down the field or certainly even just in the intermediate passing game. And so he's someone that probably a little disappointed in his overall number for today, but I'm sure he was happy to help the team get the win. He's going to be an important part of these things going forward. Thought we'd see more Jalen Lloyd. We didn't really see a lot of that. We saw a lot more tight ends. And that's really sort of curious. I don't know what the future holds at that position, but Luke Lindenmeyer and Thomas Fedoni and Heinrich Harburg sure seem like three guys worth kind of moving forward into next year and seeing how you can utilize them all differently. I thought Heinrich Harburg, he had a nice catch. He was out there, he had a critical block on some of Nebraska's run game action. It was nice to see that early on with Heinrich Harburg, someone that we think can transition pretty well to that tight end position. I know Brunt's mentioned this in one of our podcasts earlier this month, but Luke Lindenmeyer is someone that Dana Holgerson seems to have taken a liking to. He had a really nice design play where he's holding in like he's about to block, letting the defensive backs get turned, and then he cuts upfield, catches a quick pass from Dylan Raiola, picks up a first down, gets up, has a chunk of grass in his helmet. So he's a guy to kind of keep an eye on. And then, of course, Thomas Fedoni. I don't know what the future holds with Thomas Fedoni. I don't know if he's 100% going to be on Nebraska's roster next year. I haven't heard one way or the other, but there's a lot of speculation with him. With Mac Markway, with Luke Lindenmeyer, with Heinrich Harburg, I think Nebraska has options at tight end, but I still think Thomas Fedoni can help in the passing game. We saw that today. He had a handful of catches. He was able to help Nebraska move the ball down the field in the intermediate passing game. And that's where Dylan really had his bread and butter today, short and hitting running backs and hitting wide receivers. And so, I think there's still going to be a value for a guy like Thomas Fedoni. But again, Nebraska has some tight ends, and we'll see what he chooses to do. But he officially had 5 catches for 50 yards, one of the better games he's had this season. So a lot of guys were able to kind of finish out nicely for how 2024 went for them. And again, could be a springboard for 2025. That was most of the positive stuff. Nebraska's rush defense, fantastic. Really took the game away from Boston College in that regard. They had 46 yards on 26 carries, another really strong game up front from Nebraska's run defense. And that's sort of been a continuation of what Tony White brought starting in 2023. And we'll see if John Butler is able to carry that over. One of the nitpicks here, really struggled in terms of stopping Boston College in the passing game. They had 296 yards passing. They were able to get 50 yards early in the game on a short halfback screen where 2 guys missed a tackle that could have limited it to just 5 yards. And so Nebraska's tackling, which cost them the game against Iowa, the end of the regular season, was pretty sloppy early on. They couldn't get off the field on third down. They did a great job on fourth down. They got to fourth down. They were able to get the stops, but third down, Boston College had a lot of passing success, and they were able to hunt downfield against Nebraska. I really think Nebraska's safety play leaves a lot to be desired. We'll see if they're able to bring in some safeties from the transfer portal, or if they have more defensive back help that they're targeting besides Andrew Marshall of Idaho and Justin Redd of Georgia. But that's an area to me where, whether it's the emergence of some of the young guys or whatever it is, but Nebraska has to get better safety play. I thought that was a detriment to their defense almost all year long. And we saw it again, in coverage this time. And it wasn't just the safeties. The corners weren't great. I thought the pass rush really kind of fell off late in the game. It didn't seem like they were able to really kind of get Grayson James uncomfortable in the second half. And Boston College, to their credit, was able to move the ball through the air. But to Nebraska's credit, they held them to just 13 points offensively. And 7 of those points came because of a blocked punt. 2 of the points that I hadn't even mentioned yet of the 15 Boston College scored came on a blocked point after. And Matt Rule said after the game, I don't have the full quotes right in front of me, but Nebraska special teams needs an overhaul, and we know that. We'll see what happens with Ed Foley. I would be pretty surprised if he's still here in this role next year. I don't know how you could bring him back. I really don't. That was terrible. The entire year was an embarrassment to the third phase of football. And it's so far beyond just the snapping issues or whatever it is. They didn't do anything well in the third phase. They didn't return the ball well. They don't cover kicks well. They get caught in between whether they want to kick it through for a touchback or they want to do the thing where they think they can trap people inside the 25. They don't cover punts particularly well. Their gunners can't get down the field in time. Brian Buschini had an up and down year. He completed another pass, but Nebraska had to fake a field goal because they didn't know if the snap would work well enough to even attempt a field goal in the second half. So special teams is a big issue. We'll see what Nebraska ultimately chooses to do with it, but it has to be addressed. It has to be fixed. There's too much talent on this team for Nebraska to be as bad as they are on special teams. There's too much money in the Nebraska organization. There's too many people that have coaching roles on this staff for this special teams to be the joke that it was this year. I mean, and again, I know they come off harsh talking about it like this, but honestly, it was atrocious. And it was never just one thing. And it was obvious before the year that special teams was going to be an issue. And we were told that they would get it fixed, and they never did. And now you have an entire offseason to try something else, to put someone else either in charge or to take full control. I mean, maybe Matt Rule, just sort of like Bo Pelini did back in the early 2010s, decides, hey, I'm going to be the guy who handles special teams because we got to get this fixed. It worked for Bo Pelini. We'll see what Matt Rule chooses to do on it and how they choose to address it. And that kind of kicks off where things are, as we get past the bowl game here. It's a big offseason still ahead. Nebraska is going to be active in the transfer portal. That's not going to slow down anytime soon. Visits can start happening again January 1 for transfer portal entrance. The final day to put your name in is technically today, but if a coach leaves, you have 30 days, I believe, from that point forward to put your name into the transfer portal. So there's a lot of opportunity for players to continue to move around, and Nebraska is going to be a shopper in that. And then Nebraska has to finish out their staff. I don't think we know what their offensive football staff looks like beyond Dana Holgerson and Daikiel Shorts. I don't think we know what the special team situation is yet. And so there's some coaching changes, coaching staff moves to be made. And so we'll see kind of what that is and how Nebraska chooses to go about it. But the next upcoming weeks are largely going to be focused on those staffs figuring out what you want to do in the transfer portal and how to kick this thing going forward. Nebraska went 7-6 this year. That's fine for 2024. It's a successful season in that you achieve the goal of the bowl game. You achieve the goal of a winning season. But it was still, for me, and this is just me, and you can feel free to disagree with it, it still wasn't a success overall. It still feels like Nebraska underachieved in the sense that they could have won more football games. I still want to see Matt Rule grow and get better situationally. I want to see Nebraska football get better situationally. I don't want to see games like we saw on Saturday where you're up 20-2 and you can't put a team away and you have the football and you have the opportunity to go step on someone's throat or neck or head, whichever body part it is that you want to step on to finish things off. Just don't stub your own toe. And that's what Nebraska's been doing. You have an opportunity to finish that game. In 2025, Nebraska football needs to finish football games. They cannot keep giving away games or letting teams hang around and getting beat late because they're bad in the fourth quarter. This has to be addressed, and it's not something that can be addressed necessarily here today. They're going to have to get better through it, but this is an area that is a huge concern. I mean, we talk about special teams as a big concern. Nebraska finishing football games, their coaching staff putting them in the right positions, players doing the right thing, being coached and relying on the right technique. It's all there, and they have the ability to do so, but they have to go and do it in 2025, and their next opportunity won't be until August. So we'll have all offseason to debate whether they can get better at that. And, we embrace debate around here at Husker247. So I just want to thank everybody who's tuned into these post-game podcasts throughout the 2024 season. We threw this idea out there. I wasn't sure where or if there'd be that much interest, but we know there has been an overwhelming amount of people that have watched and listened to these podcasts. And so we really appreciate that. And of course, the same is true with the Hypecast and everything else. So it'll be a Sunday side session. New 1620 host Matt McMaster will join me on Sunday morning. So we'll get that out hopefully sometime around noon. So that'll be a little bit more in depth. And of course, I'll have someone to bounce a few thoughts off of, and it won't just be me talking at you. But again, appreciate everyone joining us this season and looking forward to having a lot more conversations about Nebraska football, both on the message board at Husker247.com, but also here through the podcast with the Husker247 podcast.